The profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. And we have the joy of welcoming back Reverend Liên, who is a regular guest speaker at Stone Creek Zen Center. Trying to see, is Liên there? Oh, there you are. Okay. Lynn is a Dharma sibling of Charlie and I. We all lived and trained together at Tassajara, and now work together. Lynn was instrumental in helping us write the grant for the Himera Foundation, the Healthy Buddhist Communities grant that is helping us at Stone Creek sow into our community anti-racist practice in the Dharma. And we are on a teaching team together with Lynn and through a program that she's developed around Dharma and anti-racism. So that course that's coming up beginning at the end of January, we're on that teaching team together. And Lynn is a Dharma heir of Reverend Blanche Hartman. And we're just really grateful that you can continue to bring your teaching to Stone Creek. So thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Sarah. First, can everyone hear me all right? Great, thank you. So thank you for the invitation to Abiding Teacher Warner Roshi, and of course the two head priests, Sarah and Charlie. I want to start out by saying great to be back to practice with you all. And I think last time we did the chat bloom. Today I'd like to do what I like to call, remember the Brady Bunch or Hollywood Square, since we're all in squares now, or rectangles. Yeah, so I invite you to unmute yourself and then say hi to people around you. Don't forget there's a second, well, I have a second page, I don't know what you have, and so just say hi to people.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
Hi, Shinsen.
Hi, Cindy. Hi, Janae.
Hi, Thomas.
Hello, Cindy, Donale, Liz. Yeah.
Sarah, Cindy. Hi. All right. Oh, I am recording this, excuse me. It seems like I was just saying to my Sangha last Monday that there have been many talks the last few years where I feel like I want to start out with how to practice in challenging times. There's been a lot of those. And of course, the one I and probably many of us are thinking about is the siege on the Capitol 10 days or so ago, and then the upcoming inauguration. And perhaps like many of you, watching the siege, I was just floored. And again, in recent time, I keep thinking, can it get worse? And then it just seems to get worse. And often think about, for me, it brought up a lot about responsibility and accountability. And that's why I talk about on Monday. Today, I will say that the other, when you practice, a little Dharma sticks in your mind and phrases. And so the other thing that kept coming up was delusions are endless. Delusions are endless. And of course, the whole line is, I vow to end them. And of course, these is part of our Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are endless. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. So that's a Zen Center version. I did look up yours. It's just a few differences. Same line though on the second one. For me, at least it seems obvious that what happened at the Capitol was based on delusion. And I myself am always pause when I hear myself say obvious. Only because I think there's a certain tightness around that. So I will say, and also, in part because I'm sure it comes because English is my second language. That was my only, but it was my second. And so I love the dictionary, and whenever I need some stability, I go to the Dharma, of course, these days, or the dictionary, or encyclopedias, right? So here's from the Shambhala Dictionary, Buddhism and Zen. For delusion, which is also, of course, ignorance, right? Delusion refers to belief in something that contradicts reality. In Buddhism, delusion is a lack of awareness of the true nature or Buddha nature of things, or of the true meaning of existence. According to the Buddhist outlook, we are deluded by our senses, among which intellect, discriminating, discursive thought, is included as a sixth sense. So what is it that we're not aware of as the true meaning of existence? It's the interconnectedness of our lives. Of course, we have the teaching, comes from the Vedic tradition of the net of Indra, right? How they're jewels at all the nodes, and that we reflect each other, and also, of course, about the net itself. And in the course that we're teaching on the Dharma being anti-racist, we talk a lot more about the net as the conditions that supports us, or where is it that it doesn't support us, and how does that sense of connection can be broken or disrupted, right? And we could say that what happened at the Capitol is a part of the net was really shaken and torn. And of course, today is also, well, tomorrow will be, when was the 15th? That was Friday, was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and tomorrow is the official celebration. So, and of course, Dr. King was influenced by Gandhi, and then also, of course, knew Thich Nhat Hanh. And so I want to bring in a quote from him. And this is actually from one of his most famous ones, which I'll say later, is the letters from Birmingham, of course, when he was jailed. And that was in 1967, but this is from 1963. And it was on Christmas Eve, and 1963 was Birmingham jail. This one's in 1967, so his development was a little bit more. And this one is called Interconnected World, or the Christmas Sermon. And of course, this is just a little bit of it. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning without being dependent on most of the world? You get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and reach over for the sponge, and that's handed to you by a Pacific Islander. You reach for a bar of soap, and that's given to you at the hands of a Frenchman. And then you go into the kitchen to drink your coffee for the morning, and that's poured into your cup by a South American. And maybe you want tea. That's poured into your cup by a Chinese. Or maybe you're desirous of having cocoa for breakfast, and that's poured into your cup by a West African. And then you reach over for your toast, and that's given to you at the hands of an English-speaking farmer, not to mention the baker. And before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you've depended on more than half of the world. This is the way our universe is structured. This is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognize this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. So on that morning of January 6th, us here in the West Coast, maybe it was, a little bit after your breakfast, being Zen people, and up early, but it was, probably before lunch or around that time in the morning when we saw what was happening. And what happened at the Capitol was clearly not, right, or it showed us how an individual can influence a group, and that what was happening was actually the whole world gasped, and that the insurrection was really based on false beliefs, delusion, which brought fear and uncertainty, and it's continuing. So our sense of wholeness, a sense of shared value, right? A nation of goodwill and civic mindedness has been disrupted. Perhaps we could even say torn and shredded. So of course I'm thinking, well, what teachings will support us? And again, having many of these lead-ins, right? And with this, I was thinking that, again, because as Sarah shared, Charlie and her and I are teaching a course based around the Four Noble Truths, which of course has the Eightfold Path. So my whole life is about these, and not only as a Dharma and intellectual, zeal, but also because to me, we need to address suffering very, very directly these days, and it needs to be really practical response. And so these teachings, one are through all the sects, and then also they're very clear about what is wholesome, and then also gives you what is skillful ways to know them and to practice with them. And so I'm going to talk about the second factor. Should I go through the 8 factors? Is that helpful? Okay, so the 8 factors are, and remember why there are 8, so maybe I should say the whole thing. Of course, the Four Noble Truths, right? In life there's suffering, or harm and hurt has happened. There are causes and conditions for the more likely arising of dukkha, or usually translated as suffering, dis-ease, discontent, dissatisfaction. It can end, and then that there's a development or a path to that. Right? I would say that Gil Fronsdal said that in the older tradition, practice itself was considered the 4th Noble Truth, and then later became the Eightfold Path, as very much associated as the practices. And in fact, he says that in the teachings, it's often considered that the Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. Right? We're talking about, Theravada. Of course, sir. So the second factor comes with what's called the wisdom section of the 8, which is wise or skillful. understanding or view, just basically of the Four Noble Truths and karma. The second is skillful thought or thinking, which also can mean intention. And I'm going to propose vow. And then the third, so those are the wisdom, and it leads into the section that's called the ethical conduct, or the sila section, which is skillful speech, action, and livelihood. And then that leads into the samadhi, or the practice part, which is the skillful effort, skillful mindfulness, and skillful concentration. And often the practice part is considered the bridge between our sense of how the world is, our values and our aspiration from skillful view and skillful thinking, into the action part and the interaction part of the sila. So the meditative factors help us to know the truth and then how to behave in them, and then in the behavior reify our sense of what's important and our values and our wisdom. So it's considered the bridge often. So in this, the reason I think the second is so important, and we have heard that sometimes if your intention is misguided, then you can practice wrongly, or you are discouraged by practice. So intention is considered really important in practice. And also because while many of us can think of thinking as a mind kind of mostly located in the mind, it actually in Buddhism, it's not really separate from the purposefulness of how thinking drives us to the behavior and the interaction part, which again we can see very clearly on the six. So, and of course, I'm well aware that in Zen, our base practice is just to let go of thoughts, right? Like cloud in an endless sky, right? These days, I like to say that, remember, I obviously, my trust and faith is in Zen, and I interwove insight practices, because again, I think we need some tools, right, to practice. And so these days I like to think of Zen as, we're like the cheerleaders. We're like, yay, Buddha nature, we're all good, remember that as you behave. But then when, there's storm clouds, there's thunder and lightning in my sky, then I need some real tangible tools to stay seated, or to negotiate, duck and cover if I need to, or get some shelter. So for me, it's really useful to very much address the issue of suffering itself, right? So, cover that. So the second is, in Pali, is Samma Sankappa. In Sanskrit, of course, the language more of Mahayana, is Samyak Sankappa. Of course, Samma and Samyak goes in front of all the Eightfold Path. And it means, classically, it is translated as right, but of course we understand that right as not, of course there's some sense of right and wrong, but it's much more right as in alignment, or perfected, or whole, or complete, right? And we, in the course series, we're focusing on skill, because it's also, the Eightfold Path is both descriptive and prescriptive, like this is what it is, and this is how you can practice it. So that's why the skillful part is to encourage us that this is also a practice. Because remember, the practice instruction of the Fourth Noble Truth is to develop it. So that takes practice, that takes doing, that takes knowing what to do and how to do it, right? And then Sankappa, or Sankalpa, usually is translated as, and Gil says literally does mean thinking or thought, but really it means much more purposive thinking or thought. So intention is a good one, or aspiration, motivation, commitment. And that's why, and also resolve. And that's why I'm going to propose vow also. So this from the Dhammapada Gill's translation. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows, like a never departing shadow. And in the notes, Gill does say that the translation of made by mind is also translated often as impelled by mind, or mind impelled. Again, really clearly, in my sense, saying that our thoughts are not just thoughts, they really drive our speech, action, and how we are in the world, right? So this is where the intention and the motivation for me makes sense. And of course, why that's so important before the grouping of ethical behavior. And you may think, well, speech and action is there, but livelihood is also part of that. How do you do that in a continuous way, and with what motivation are you acting? And as the investigations has gone on since the 6th, there are military, police, firefighters, and elected officials who are part of the insurrection. So it does, our thinking, our thoughts do really translate into very meaningful, serious impact in the world. So that's why it's critical that we understand our thinking and know how to work with them. So in the middle length discourses, the Buddha noticed 2 categories of thoughts. One is desire, ill will, and harmfulness. In some translations, even violence and cruelty. And then he also noticed another grouping of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness, or compassion. So part of the work, really the impetus of my reframing of the 4 Noble Truths into what I call engage, is that the seed of it started when I was at the Gen X teacher conference in 2017. And that was when all the sexual misconduct in our sanghas was happening. And so, of course, being a teacher conference, we had a session on restorative stuff, and it was brought in the right use of power as a way to work. And I love the right use of power. I like it, without a doubt. And yet, what is exciting to me about this is that the 4 Noble Truths is the Dharma, and to me, it actually points towards a restorative model within itself. Right? And so, in this framing, the first set of 3, right, of desire, ill will, and harmfulness or violence or cruelty is actually to be practiced by replacing them, or working on, or practicing with renunciation, right, goodwill, and harmlessness or compassion. So the first set are what is more likely to bring up dukkha, and the second is in thoughts, is how we can harmonize with wholeness, you could say. And in fact, we're practicing not only to know, but to be more confident, right? And knowing what states of mind sets the ground for wholeness, and also how to restore when, in cases like on the 6th, when delusional thinking has happened, right? So of course, first is when there's unwholesome or unskillful desire. Notice it's the unwholesomeness of it. Desire itself is not a problem. Desiring to practice for good is a healthy desire, right? So when there's unwholesome desire, the practice is to work with renunciation or relinquishment. Classically, one level is what's called the material goods, which are the 8 worldly dharmas, right? Or conditions and concerns of the world, right? Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disrepute, or status and disgrace. Pretty obvious. Those are in huge play at the capital, right? And then the second set is obsessive thinking about the sense of self, who I am and how I need to defend that. And the third category in the what's called the material goods or the worldly dharmas is fear, and very much specifically fear of the material goods and the sense of self, right? So defending that, again, to me, really clearly seen on the 6. And of course, while we say the 6, it's been around a long time, right? So for today's purpose, and I want to talk about it as relinquishment, this whole set here. When unwholesome desire arises, we want to relinquish self-focus, or referencing how we can get more in terms of the 8 worldly dharmas and having power for ourselves, or defending the loss of it, we think, right? The fear of it, of having or losing. Right? And instead then to focus on the net itself, right? Not so much about the jewels in the net, not that the jewels are not part of the net, but where is it that we can focus much more on what holds us together, what connects us, right? So wholeness thinking, we could say, then is to let go or renounce self-referencing, individual-centered thinking, and also not of myself, centering self in that way, but also centering self in the world, right? To not have just the world of me and mine, but the world of we and us, I could say. Also, it's a letting go or renouncing of the belief that such a view or understanding has no consequence. That when I keep thinking about myself, that's not a problem, right? Now, of course, we have to think about ourselves. That's not what I'm saying that we shouldn't, but we have to also balance that with a sense of ourselves in context. I teach a introduction meditation course, very popular in January. So this last week we were just talking about how we focus, and most people come to learn meditation because they want to calm their mind. I know that's where I started, around meditation, right? I just want to calm my mind, get rid of all the distraction, learn to focus better, and all those things are highly possible and achievable, though I like to say that it's the result of concentration as opposed to the doing, right? Anyways, so I know that this is a question that comes up a lot, and people, often say, well, thoughts come out of nowhere and I can't do anything about them, right? And what's your answer to that, right? And I will say, people do come to that course a couple times. So this was somebody, very sincere. She's been practicing for a while. And I said, actually, as a Buddhist practitioner, I myself think that there cannot be the sense of I can't do anything about it, right? Because in the moment of knowing that you're distracted in your thinking, that it's delusional, that it's I think one translation of it is scattered and wandering around or something. In that moment, then you have a responsibility and accountability to do something right there in that moment of awareness. We're not just aware to let it be, because there is this false, and then it did come up in that conversation. To me, it's a very false or misunderstanding of this popular mindfulness practice, which is just be with things as they are, be with things as they are, and so they were like, shouldn't you just be with things, whatever it is? I'm like, no, because if you have thoughts of hatred, are we just going to be with hatred, right? It doesn't mean we shouldn't know how hatred feels, right? But the part that doesn't get focused a lot is so much of practice is to what gives us insight is to really learn how to focus on a huge part is the consequences of what happens when I allow hatred, like the thought of hatred, to keep on going, or the thought of lust or the thought of cruelty to keep on going, right? Not that we're bad to have them, but we need to see, we need to reflect on and observe in the world what are the consequences, and where in that we can more clearly see, oh, if it stops there, then this is less likely to happen. If it stops here, then this is, if it stops here, then that's less likely to happen. So wholeness thinking then is to let go of thoughts that disrupt or denies or lowers our sense of interconnectedness, and incline the mind to know and reside in wholeness, in states that is conducive to the knowing and the confidence in wholeness. And so in doing so, I'm actually going to propose that, so remember renunciation, non-aversion or metta, and compassion are the set of wholesome thoughts that the Buddha noticed, right? So I'm going to suggest that the second and third component of skillful thinking not only points to what they are, but they also support us to practice on what, where, and how to focus our attention and our intention to how we know connectedness and wholeness in a unifying sense of thought and purpose. So to counteract aversion, we're invited to practice metta, or maitri, of course, is the Sanskrit. Often translated as loving kindness. Goodwill, or unconditional friendliness are also translations that I myself really like, goodwill and unconditional friendliness. And then to counteract harmfulness, violence, and cruelty, there's the practices of karuna, or compassion. Both of these heart-mind qualities, of course, is part of the 4 Brahma Viharas, or the 4 divine abodes. And the other 2 being mudita, I like to say inclusive joy, often translated as empathetic or altruistic joy. And then upekkha, or upeksha, usually translated as equanimity. And actually within the 4 Brahma Vihara, that equanimity comes through understanding karma. I myself these days like to also say that resilience could be considered part of upekkha. Right? But that's imputation on my part, not necessarily a direct translation. Though I did talk to Gil about it, and he thought it could possibly be. Right? So actually, I want to invite you for a minute to do this reflection with me. So if you take a meditative or reflective posture, and then the Brahma Viharas are guided meditations. Right? So I'm going to just guide you in a very short meditation. So just be quiet for a bit while you find your seat or find your posture, be it standing, sitting, or lying down, perhaps walking even. And in the Brahma Vihara, it's actually really important that the posture is of ease, and that we know these qualities to be true and possible, just like the sense of prayer And in this day, there have been a lot of studies of metta, which is similar to lots of study on prayer, that they really do have an impact. Maybe not always tangibly quantified, but certainly knowable and felt. And I'm going to lead you, and at any point in which what I invite you to focus on, pay attention to, is difficult, then please just return to whatever your anchor is, be it a posture point or a breath point or shikantaza itself. So what comes up for you around the insurrection on the 6th, or perhaps the upcoming inauguration? And just locate it in a body point if you can. Really feel the sensation there. Not as a to fix it, just more that right now we're fully acknowledging the hurt or the harm, the felt sense of hurt and harm. And then I'll say these phrases from the metta meditation, and I'll invite you to, I'm going to say it in the I, because I want to invite you to take all these phrases or one of these as a way to care for your hurt and harm. The sense, whatever the sense of hurt and harm you're having around it. Maybe the hurt and harm is that I'm doing this meditation, whatever it is. Classically, I say the phrase and you repeat it to yourself silently. May I be filled with goodwill towards all. Let me connect to a sense of well-being here and now. Let peace and ease be my guide today and every day. And may I know true happiness all the days of my life. On the inhale, you're going to connect with how you know that is true and possible, any sense of this. And on the exhale, you're going to feel it bodily, again, anywhere. Any part of yourself can just connect and really have confidence that they're true and possible. This is what we're strengthening, the possibility. Rest there. Take a few breaths. Connect with your kindness, your good heart. And then with these phrases of compassion or karuna, I'm going to invite you to imagine that these are ones that you're going to send out. And there's a group of categories that I'm just going to take one phrase and say each category. Again, whatever resonates for you, go with that one. If it doesn't, just go back to your anchor. Let's start with ourselves. May I know an alleviation to my pain and sorrow whenever I need it. May my good friend or friends be able to access forgiveness for mistakes they have made. May this neutral person or stranger be able to connect with patience for themselves and with others. This difficult or challenging person or group of people or beings, know that inner and outer safety is possible if only for a moment. And may all beings, including this one, know that freedom from suffering and the causes and conditions of suffering is possible and true. On the inhale, you're going to connect with how you know that it can be true and possible. And see if you can locate it very viscerally, so that at any point after this, when you return to that point in your body or breath, there's a connection to that can support you and sustain you. And then you want to wish that for one or all groups. Just imagine perhaps someone in this Zoom room or in your life, or that person unhoused outside your doors, or a group of people. Just send it to them, and as the category is all beings, and includes yourself. So let it feel it coming back. You know that 25 other people in this room is sending it to all beings, so you're going to get at least 25 back. So let that in. Let it support you to know that it's true and possible. Ding! I forgot to put my bell by me. So please be patient and forgive my mistake. So, both all the Brahma Viharas, of course, as a practice, right? They're not just to be memorized. You are encouraged to memorize the phrases just so they come up easily. But really, they're to be practiced. And the categories, to me, is a way that we can practice with expanding a sense of wholeness. Right? First, it starts with me. What is whole in me? These qualities, right? This is a set of practice that tells you what it is, and then asks you to know it for yourself, and then to give it away in this increment that opens you up to bigger and bigger wholeness. And then, in doing them, it is a purifying practice, so often difficult emotions come up with it, or what's called the near and far enemy. Right, the far one of metta is ill will, just exactly what in the teaching of the skillful thinking is. And then compassion is violence, is that what I said? Harming, yes. So, and the near enemy of compassion is pity, right? P-I-T-Y, right? And the near enemy of metta is self-referencing kindness, right? So, in practicing with these, we learn to be more confident in them, right? And so, to me, that is a strengthening of a confidence that they're true and possible. Because when I know that it's true and possible, I'm more upright with it, both in the sense that they're in me, that I know them more and more, and that they're really qualities that are the world and others can also know and feel. Now, this confidence is an uprightness, which is what we talk about as vow. So one of the translation of sankappa or sankalpa is resolve. At the beginning of the year, I almost always have a precept cohort study. We do it for 8 months. And the first meeting is always about vowing. What does it mean to vow? And for me, the precept practice, and I do expand it to more than just taking Jukai, is for people to just study it, right? I call it engaged studies, right? Because I think all of us should have a way to know and really practice with what values, what do these values mean to us now? How do we learn them? And how are they now for us? And how do we practice with them so that we know that they're important to us, and which way and how are they important to us? And I often say that attention plus intention equals integrity or commitment or vow. So let our vows, right, of saving numerous being, ending delusion, entering Dharma gates, and becoming, knowing in the becoming of our Buddha-ness. By that I mean our, mine and yours. Right? Let it not be passive ones. Right? Our thoughts are not passive. So how do we use our thoughts and skillfully enact them in wholesome ways towards a sense of wholeness and completeness, not only in ourselves, but with others, as a way to strengthen the net as opposed to tearing or putting too much burden on the net. So this is from letters from a Birmingham jail of Dr. King, of course. I have not said to my people, get rid of your discontent. Rather, I have tried to say that this normal and healthy discontent can be channeled into the creative outlet of nonviolent direct action. And now this approach is being termed extremist. This is in 63. But though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Then he names a few other examples. Then he says, so the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? Thank you for your attention, and I welcome any interactions with you on this. You have a few minutes, right? And did you want to do communication stuff or?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to do kind of offer a possibility that we've done before, and I just want to keep sewing it into our question and answer time of just considering, this. There's an idea of like stepping forward and stepping back. So if you're somebody who's comfortable stepping forward and often do, consider stepping back and leaving room. I think I was in a workshop yesterday and I could see this happening. People were saying like, well, I'm talking because I got uncomfortable because it was quiet. And I understand, and I think we all know that feeling. I think the thing about that though is it doesn't leave room for the folks who may be processing a little bit more differently and need a little time. So what I wanted to offer is the possibility to sit with the discomfort if there's a little bit of quiet, so that different voices can come forward. Yeah. And just that in general. And for today.
And I'll just say someone requested the phrases. I think they meant the meditation phrases, so I put them in the chat. And then I'll also say that if you prefer to communicate through chat, feel free, because for some people that's a way of communicating that works better for them. Maybe I'll ask. I have a query about whether anything I've said has been supportive to you around if you're happen to have anxiety these days around these issues. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. And yes, I found it very supportive. I've been trying to resist, which is maybe problematic itself, certain kinds of feelings around the 6th and people that participated in various ways, and having the phrases and feeling into the phrases was very helpful. So thank you very much for that.
Thomas.
I would like to also say thank you very, very much. Anxiety for me is very visceral in my torso, my chest, stomach, and saying those beautiful, beautiful phrases along with concentrating on my breath was very, very helpful. And I'm happy to have them now. I will definitely repeat them going forward. So thank you.
Yeah.
May I ask a question, Reverend Lynn?
Yeah.
I mean, I do talk a lot, but I don't often ask questions. What I've noticed was one of the things that's arisen for me since watching the insurrection is I get frustrated. The place where a lot of my frustration lands is on feeling angry with people for like a refusal to grow up. like a chosen immaturity, or even like an entitlement to a childlike view of the world. And then I realize I've been hurt by that. I've been hurt by, especially white men, actually standing in a place of innocence that is so dualistic that it causes harm. So any insights you have around compassion for that state of inappropriate innocence, I would be grateful for.
I was trying to pull up who is it that I read a quote. I think it was Bell Hooks, and I can't pull up the quote exactly. That we have to. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. That when we meet I don't think they said evil, but almost as strong as the word evil. We have to believe in the power of transformation. And to me, that's partly why the four Brahma Viharas are such great practices, because it gives us a way to and they're considered purifying practices, and they're actually really difficult. When I did the 2-month at Spirit Rock in 2006, afterwards, I was talking to someone who practiced Zen with me at Tassajara, and was very verbal about not liking being at Tassajara. And then they, went to Spirit Rock practice. Then they came back to Zen Center. But anyways, they were like an aversive type in general, which I'm also. So, and so they said they had asked their teacher if they could practice metta for 2 months, and they thought, oh, then I'll just become this gooey, loving person. And they said they spent most of the 2 months just and really have a hard time, and all the ill will came up. And we know this, that our practice is a purifying practice. And when it's difficult, when we stay with it, and we can stay within a skillful, wise way, this is why instruction is needed, and guidance and support is needed. That's why we have Sangha and Dharma, right? So to help with that, and I think also the phrases call for that: forgiveness for ourselves when we can't, and then patience. Again, I can't remember, though I think it might have been Trungpa Rinpoche who said, Christians, as they practice, access more grace, and Buddhists, when we practice, strengthen our patience. And I'm a very impatient person, and while I don't think my patience is continuous and strong all the time, I definitely think it has been strengthened. So we have to trust that that's possible. And of course, the more practical thing is that we can't assume that just having the words and having the aspiration is enough, that it has to be practice. And so is there a way that we can create ways of learning that's from modeling, from enacting it, and my first response to you actually was, why are you asking me? You're the parent, right? So you do much more with that than I have. So as you would treat your children when they're immature, how can you, on one level, I would say, where is it in us that feels immature? And so how can we care for that? And then, because when we're settled in that, then other people, immaturity doesn't affect us as much. Of course, how much power they have impacts us more. So I'm not, denying the reality of things, for sure. And it is a both here and there practice, and the negotiation of both points.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I want to add, it's not just that I've been harmed by it. I feel like I've watched this kind of this power and immaturity cause so much harm.
I agree.
But thank you for looking inside too.
Yeah, it certainly has been emboldened. Maybe we're starting to really realize no more, a lot of the world thinks of the United States as a teenager. So maybe it is a call for all of us to wake up as a nation, to mature. All right, I have 11:30. Tell me what to do next.
I will. I'll post the closing chant. It's just to take me 1 second.
When she's doing that, I want to thank you all for your attention and your presence. been a pleasure.
So the closing verse is in the chat. For great Bodhisattva beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it.